A life with the green and gold this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Jay Wilson sitting in for Neil Heinen. When Madison native Jessie Garcia was starting her career in sports journalism, Wisconsin football was undergoing massive change. Barry Alvarez was telling Badger fans to get their season tickets while they could. And Mike Holmgren was about to lead a momentous turnaround in Green Bay. In her 20 years of covering the Green Bay Packers, Jessie Garcia has seen and heard a lot, from Super Bowls to Brett Favre's on-again, off-again, on-again retirement, to viewer phone calls complaining that she doesn't know anything about sports because she's a chick. Well, she has now put her favorite sportscasting memories into a new book entitled My Life with the Green and Gold. She started her career at WISC TV, and we are pleased to welcome back Jessie Garcia. Jessie, welcome to For the Record.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be back here.
Yeah, and everybody still knows you. Well, everybody out there knows you too. A lot of people remember. Catch us up on your life. What you doing these days?
Oh, what am I doing these days? My goodness.
What are you not doing these days, I guess?
Well, I'm at WTMJ in Milwaukee. I've been there for 19 years now, which is amazing to me because it's gone so incredibly quickly. It seems like yesterday I was just starting here at WISC. But I'm still working. I've been part-time, actually, ever since my oldest son was born, and he's now 14. So I work part-time at WTMJ. I'm teaching at 2 local colleges, teaching broadcast journalism. So much fun. Highly recommend it to anybody if you want to, I'm just passing on to the next generation and all that good stuff. And then I'm writing. I've written this book, which is just being released now, and I'm working on a second book. And I have a couple ideas for a third and a fourth, and really enjoying writing and sort of breaking out of the TV box and getting into longer form writing.
Can you let the cat out of the bag on what the second book is?
Sure, I would love to. I'm writing a book with the family of Olympic gold medal speed skater Casey Fitzrandolph. A lot of people around here will certainly recognize his name, Verona native. And the family wanted to tell their story about their entire family story, which includes Casey's rise and the gold medal. And then his sister was diagnosed 8 years later with stage 4 breast cancer, which she is still fighting. But the reason they wanted to tell their story is because they're using alternative methods to fight the cancer. So they've gone to Germany for chemo that's not available here in America. They're doing lots of different alternative, non-conventional methods, and they wanted to share with people what they did and why, and also the incredible mix of emotions they've had in their lives, from the highest of the high elation to the lowest of the lows when your daughter is diagnosed with breast cancer.
Well, that whets our appetite for what's to come. Let's get back to My Life with the Green and Gold. You are a self-proclaimed terrible athlete. How in the world did you end up in sportscasting?
A lot of people wonder that, chiefly my mother. I was not a good athlete, but I always loved writing. And the sports part kind of came along later. I thought I'd be a newspaper reporter, thought I'd probably be a newspaper reporter. But then in high school, I started covering sports as well for the high school paper, Madison East. And go Purgolders. And I loved it. I just really loved covering sports. It was so much fun. So I sort of started teaching myself sports because I didn't grow up around sports. My mother and father were divorced when I was very young. I was an only child. It was just my mom and I. And she was not at all into sports, not even 1 ounce, still knows nothing about sports. She doesn't get football. She says it's like a bunch of people moving around. And they run, then they stop, they run, then they stop. That's how she describes football. So it's amazing that I came from that background to be a sportscaster, but it all worked out.
And just as remarkable that you're writing books?
I guess so. Yeah, I was writing books about sports. Yeah.
In your early days of broadcasting here, we mentioned the transition of the Badger football program under Barry Alvarez. Do you have memories of those days? Favorite memory, favorite player of your days covering the Badgers?
Sure. Well, we hosted the Barry Alvarez show here. Van Stout was the host. Van was my sports director, was the best sports director I ever could have asked for. He was so much fun.
Why are you laughing when you say that?
Because he was just so
He was Van.
Fun. He was Van.
He was Van.
Yeah. He had all these sayings, He'd say, too bad, so sad, I'm glad you're mad, which I still use sometimes. He was just Van. But anyway, he was the host of the Barry Alvarez show, and I would do feature stories for it, and that was a great deal of fun. So I remember being here when Barry would come in every week to tape the show, and he was great. He was always great to me and to Van and to everybody else. Favorite players, I would have to say, I think Joe Panos jumps to mind, and also Darrell Bevell. They both obviously were great players, but Joe Panos, I will never forget the Camp Randall Stampede situation when they beat Michigan in 1993, and how Joe Panos jumped in to help and how emotional he got about that situation. And then with Darrell Bevell, he was married at the time that he was quarterback here, which was pretty unusual for NCAA football player, and we did a bunch of stories with him and his wife at the time, so I got to know them pretty well. And then when he went on to be an assistant for the Packers and the Vikings, and sort of followed him all the way through. Great guy.
And at the same time, Mike Holmgren, Ron Wolf are turning the Packers around. Do we kind of forget how incredible those times were?
It was really a special time to be a sports fan or a sportscaster in the state of Wisconsin. Looking back on it, you don't quite maybe realize it when you're in the middle of it, because it's just what you're doing and you don't realize where it's going. And then when you look back, you think, wow, Barry was turning them into just perennial Rose Bowlers, and Mike Holmgren was turning them into perennial title contenders, and it was amazing. So I feel very fortunate to have covered all of those years.
Yeah. Okay, let's get you to Green Bay now. When you anchored the Mike Holmgren TV show, you were one of the first, if not the first, female anchors to do that solo. What was that like?
True. Well, first we just saw a photo there of that was that was me changing.
Here's you and Holmgren first.
Okay, yeah. So there's me and Mike Holmgren, and yeah, I hosted the Mike Holmgren show his last year in Green Bay before he left for Seattle, and I think I would have done more years beyond that if he hadn't have gone to Seattle at that point. And I was one of, I'm not sure if I was the first, absolute first in the country, but definitely one of the first women to host an NFL coaches show. And I was 28, 29 at the time. So, but he was just wonderful. He has 4 daughters, and he gets it. He understands women, and he was so nice to me. And then I got pregnant with my first son just a few months into the beginning of the Mike Holmgren show, and he was so great, asking me how I felt every single time, and really a very caring guy.
But there had to have been anxiety, pressure, nervousness on your part.
I suppose there was. I do remember being, somewhat nervous. We taped at 9 a.m. in Green Bay every Monday morning. So we'd have to leave Milwaukee at, 6 a.m. to make sure we got there and got all set up. So mostly I remember, especially after I was pregnant, feeling kind of nauseous, sleeping in the back of our producer's car, on the way up there every week. And we taped in front of a live audience, which actually I think actually helped ease the nerves, if you can believe that, because it's such a raucous atmosphere. It's almost like a party atmosphere every single week, and the fans all wanted to ask him questions too, and so it was really fun. I don't remember being that nervous about it.
Yeah. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to explain why you're on Lambeau Field with a baby.
Sounds good.
Okay. We'll be right back with more For the Record.
Your toss, Bridget.
Lowe will never be forgotten at Wisconsin, but the 1992 Badgers belong to a 35-year-old father and first-time head coach named John Cook.
It's the way to come through, Amy, with the pressure on.
Of the 10 members of this year's Badger women's volleyball program, only 2 ever played under Steve Lowe. The 8 others were either recruited by him before he passed away or are brand new to the program altogether.
Oh my gosh.
2 things. John Cook wore really short shorts, and your hairstyle's changed.
Yeah, not that dramatically, but yes, that is so strange to see. I look so young, when you look at that now.
But it wasn't that long ago.
Well, 20 years?
Yeah, that's not.
21 years?
That's not that long.
Sure.
Wait till you're
2
55.
decades.
20 years is nothing. Let's go back to the picture we referenced earlier. It's you in a tunnel at Lambeau Field.
And what's happening in that picture? I am changing my oldest son's diaper.
Really?
He was, I think, a month old, maybe something like that, and I had to go to Lambeau to tape. We did a show called Inside 1265 Lombardi Avenue being the address of the Green Bay Packers. And I had to go up and tape something, even though he was 1 month old. And so he came up with me, and my husband Paul came as well. He was there. He was the one taking the picture. So Paul was holding Jake during the times that we were taping, but then he needed his diaper changed. He needed to be fed. It was kind of comical now that I look back on it, actually changing the diaper there. And then also we took a picture at the 50-yard line with him in his little car seat. So it was a good memory.
And those are great stories, but realistically, to be a wife and a mother and to be a TV sportscaster, That doesn't always fit, does it?
It's been challenging, there's no question. You know, being a sportscaster means nights and weekends and holidays.
Really?
Newsflash.
Yeah, really.
Because
but obviously.
Yeah, and those are the hours. That's when sports are happening, and so that's what's expected out of you. And that's why I dropped to part-time after my oldest one was born. I just couldn't do it all. And WTMJ was great about letting me go. You know, first I started off 4 days a week, then it was 3 days a week, then it was, you know, I'll fill in when I can. And that's kind of the way it is right now.
And that's a big part of this book as well. It's not just about talking to Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. It's about the challenges of crying when you're going to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, in fact, it starts off, the very first chapter, the prologue, starts off with me, I'm driving to the airport to go to Super Bowl 45, and I'm crying. And this absolutely, of course, happened because I was so torn about leaving my kids, especially the younger one who was in first grade at that point, and you know he's clinging to my leg, you know, crying, doesn't want me to leave, and it's heart-wrenching. It's so hard. So I think any working parent can relate to that. Some of the challenges that you have trying to juggle everything and trying to, hopefully be somewhat moderately successful at everything you do. But the most important part is the parenting to me, and I think that really comes through in the book.
How about the challenges of being a woman in a sports-dominated business, or a male-dominated business? Excuse me.
Certainly, there have been some challenges to that. Not as many as I thought. Coming into the business in 1992, there were not many female sportscasters. There were a few on the national level. We had Robin Roberts and Leslie Visser and Linda Cohn from ESPN. But on the local level, there really were not many. And you mentioned at the very beginning of the show about somebody calling in to say chicks, you know, not going to watch Channel 3 because you're a chick and chicks don't know sports. That absolutely happened here. And I was kind of floored at the time. You know, I always thought of Madison as being such a liberal, open-minded city. And growing up here, I had such a support network coming back and starting my career here that when that happened, I thought, whoa. Not everybody's on board with this, and I'm going to have to change some minds here and convince people that I can talk about sports.
Has the landscape changed since then?
Yes, very much so. I mean, you look across the state, there are so many females in the stations just across the state, and then if you look nationally, you'll see women on the sidelines, almost every single game that you watch these days on ESPN, everywhere. So it has absolutely changed, and if I have been a tiny part of that, you know, I wasn't one of the very first trailblazers, but if I kind of, helped along the path, then I'm proud of that.
And by hanging in there and succeeding, it has created so many opportunities for you to visit places. I forgot the Packers had a preseason game in Tokyo, but you've done that. You've covered Super Bowls. You've hosted coaches shows. I mean, it's really remarkable the opportunities that a East Side Madison girl has been able to accomplish.
That's true. I always say I never would have traveled half the places in this country or this world if I hadn't been a sportscaster, because we do get to go to a lot of places and a lot of cool events. And, Super Bowl 45, although I was crying when I was heading out there because of my child, I was still conscious of the fact that this is a great opportunity. Such a thing that, you work your whole career for and you want to be at. But yeah, I've been to the White House with the Packers, been to Tokyo, been on their plane. It's all in the book.
Yeah, and I had a chance. I haven't read the whole thing, but I've read just enough of it to know that there's some great stories in there.
Thanks, Jay.
Brett Favre, what's he like?
Brett Favre, total character.
He is what we think he is? Or is that an old saying from some coach?
They are what we thought they are.
Yeah, that's what we thought they are.
Yeah, I mean, I always really liked Brett Favre. I was stunned by his fall from grace. I thought that he would be just the king of Wisconsin forever. So, he's human, and that, I think, comes through in the book as well. I share a couple of personal anecdotes. Just for instance, I had a potty training conversation with Brett Favre because his daughter and my son were born at about the same time. And so one time we talked about how potty training was going. He's a human being, and so those types of things I wanted to impart to people that, these guys are they're more than coaches, more than players. They're human beings, and I'm more than a sports reporter, human being, multifaceted, lots of things going on. But Brett Favre, always liked him, great soundbite, interesting guy, just, was really disappointed in the way it all went down at the end.
How about Aaron Rodgers? What's he like?
I like Aaron Rodgers a lot. Incredibly, incredibly smart guy. He's just, whip smart. And I think that he handled the entire Brett Favre on-again, off-again situation so very well. He basically set the blueprint for how to do that for anybody in the future. Classy guy, and there's a couple of Aaron Rodgers anecdotes in there, as well as Mike McCarthy and Ron Wolf, and many of the Packers figures that you know.
Yeah, you cover the Badgers, you cover the Packers. What are the differences, challenges, changes from covering college athletes to pro athletes?
Oh, well, one of the big things is the locker room. And people do always ask about that because you go into pro locker rooms, you do not go into college locker rooms. So when we're covering the Badgers, as you know, you wait out in the weight room for them to come out, and they bring players out. In the NFL, you go into the locker room, and that's just the way it is. And so I wrote a whole chapter on the locker room situation because people ask me that all the time. What's it really like, et cetera, et cetera. If you've seen the movie Jerry Maguire, there's a locker room scene in there with a female sports reporter that I've always hated because it's exactly the stereotype that it's not. So I try to detail that in the book, too.
All right. The book is My Life with the Green and Gold, 20 Years of Sportscasting, Tales of 20 Years of Sportscasting. We'll wrap things up with Jessie Garcia on For the Record in just a moment. The book is My Life with the Green and Gold, Tales of 20 Years of Sportscasting with Jessie Garcia. And boy, book signings coming up. Wisconsin Book Festival Book Talk, Madison Central Library, that's coming up on Friday, October 18th. And then also an Ella's Deli book signing. Ooh, that'll be fun. You can get a snack out there or
Absolutely.
something.
I used to be a hostess there in high school. That was my high school job. So they've been kind enough to offer to host a book talk.
Don't let them rope you back into doing that again.
I could be seating people, signing books, all at one time.
Well, you'll know your way around. That's good.
Right.
So writing a book sounds like an awfully large project to handle. So tell us about the process of making this book.
Sure. Well, the idea came along, it's probably been brewing for a long time, because I would always think to myself, boy, this is so funny, or if people only knew what this was really like behind the scenes. But a couple of years ago, one cold December day, I was eating breakfast. The kids they're both in school full time, and I just started typing out a first chapter on the laptop, and it kind of just steamrolled from there. I wrote it in about 2 months because it was a memoir. It just all came tumbling out. I was up till 5 a.m. a couple of nights, or I'd wake up at 4 a.m. just filled with ideas and just be writing away. And then I was looking for a publisher, which it probably took about 5-6 months to find a publisher. It's not easy these days to find one, but I found the perfect partner in the Wisconsin Historical Society Press because they publish anything that is related to Wisconsin. They love Wisconsin, and I love Wisconsin. It's a great fit. And then the editing process and the whole production process takes about 18 months. So I really wrote it about almost 2 years ago now, and now it's coming out.
Wow. When we're in college and we have to write a 10-page paper, we think, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to write 10 pages? This is what, 240 some?
Right.
Don't you worry about I'm not going to have enough stuff to fill?
Actually, it's funny because it started off even bigger than this. It was 95,000 words,
and
they had to get down. So we wound up dropping a few chapters, which is painful to do because it's near and dear to your heart. But I realized that it did make it a more focused book as well in the end with the chapters that they did take out. So I way overwrote. I wrote too much, and it's so much fun. I love writing, and in television, we are often told shorter, shorter, shorter. A 2-minute story is considered a long story in television, so to be able to have the freedom to just write was really refreshing.
Yeah. Let's go back to the Packers. We talked about Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers a little bit, but the coaches are always, the head coaches are always interesting characters, from Mike McCarthy, Ray Rhodes, Mike Sherman, Mike Holmgren started that process. Are they all completely different guys, or are they control freaks, all of them, or are they all unique in their own way?
Right. Well, there I am with Mike McCarthy and Larry McCarron. Larry and I hosted
doing the show, right?
Right. We hosted the Mike McCarthy show. That was actually taken on the last day of the last show from the last year that I did it. So that's all detailed in the book as well. But I think that most coaches have at least like a common thread. You could say control freaks. You could say tightly wound. They very organized. I mean, they go and go and go all day long. One story I tell in the book is how we followed Mike McCarthy from 7 a.m. till 11:30 p.m. for a story called A Day in the Life of Mike McCarthy, strangely enough. And
marketing department came through that time, didn't they?
Exactly. And, you know, just to see his organization and the color-coded charts and all this stuff and how much they cram into one day. This was just one day of training camp. You know, is absolutely incredible. So there's some common threads there, but they all have their own personalities as well. I've really gotten to like Mike McCarthy a lot. Got to know his parents, his brother, his daughter, you know, his wife. And those stories are in there too.
So you've been able to go on the inside and see how complicated professional football is. It's not just run some plays. I mean, from the start of the week all the way through.
Oh, it's
an incredible
unbelievable task. What goes on behind the scenes to get ready for these games. It truly is, and it makes you appreciate all the hours that these coaches put into this, and seeing them trying to juggle family as well. One story that's in there is Mike McCarthy, on the day we were doing A Day in the Life, his 3-year-old daughter was there to have lunch with him, and he stole just a few minutes to sit with her and eat some noodles, you know, at his secretary's desk. And so to see him as a dad, and then to see him, you know, juggling all of his coaching duties is, you know, it's heartwarming.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Packer team that you covered? One that maybe stands out as a great group of characters or fun to be around?
You know, it's a tough call between the Super Bowl 31 winners and the Super Bowl 45 winners. 45 I mentioned because they had so many injuries, and it was just amazing that they win as far as they possibly did. And I really enjoyed Charles Woodson and his personality as well. But I think 31 might have to win out of the whole group, because it had been so long, obviously, since the Packers had any glory. To see the state wrapped up in that frenzy was amazing. And then all the characters on that team, Reggie White, Andre Rison, you remember they added him late? Yeah. So it all came together amazingly well, I would say them.
And you've also experienced Brewers, Olympians, so many other things in your career as well. And
sure.
Are common threads there too in successful
yes.
areas?
Common threads, you know, one thing I point out in the book is you can really tell how a team's going to do just by their demeanor a lot of times, their locker room, their sort of charisma, and their attitude. So, you know, you sort of have a sense if they're going to be one of those special teams or they're not going to be one of those special teams. But yeah, Brewers, I was in their locker room for the champagne celebrations, you know, in the last few years, and that's all detailed in there. Olympians from Bonnie Blair to Casey Fitzrandolph and many others in between. Chris Whitty, you know, all the different speed skaters we have. Covering them's been a joy too.
Great. My Life with the Green and Gold. Where can we find it if we want to get a copy of it?
Amazon.com, or you can go to the Wisconsin Historical Society Press website, or bookstores, though it'll be out very soon.
All right, or they can come see you in person at
Ella's Deli
in December.
Exactly.
All right, we'll be back to wrap it up on For the Record in just a bit. Our thanks to Jessie Garcia for being here. Neil's going to be back next week, and we'll see you next Sunday.